Hey, welcome to Rob Paints Models. This is part 2 of how to paint Deathwatch. There was so much stuff to do in this part that I had to split it up into 2 extra parts, so in this part we'll be doing the red and silver parts of the model mostly. We'll also be doing the little green light that's on his backpack. In part 3 we'll be covering the leather parts, the knife, and his snow base. Okay, we're going to start by painting the red details. So we're going to have a vertical red stripe on his knee pad here for the third watch company. And that's going to be pretty much it on the actual body here, but we will also be using this exact same method on the bolter later. So I'm just going to start by freehanding my stripe. I'm going to be using Doomball Brown, then layering up with Mephiston Red, and finally with Evil Sun Scarlet. Okay, this guy's excellent because he's got 4 rivets on his knee pad, which is going to help guide our straight line. So I'm just going to start by painting our centre line down the middle, like that. And I'm just going to expand this left and right until we get to the size that we want. So I want it to cover about the middle third of the knee pad. It's okay if you're not perfectly straight at this point, because you can always go back with your Deathwatch black and tidy up the edges afterwards. So there we go, I've got it relatively straight on that first coat, but again, touch up with Deathwatch black if you need to. So I think 2 coats is enough. So just let that dry while I put some Mephiston Red on my palette. Now I'm going to be thinning down my Mephiston Red as it's a base paint, and we want to do this in a couple of translucent layers. I'm not really glazing, but I don't want to just have a harsh transition. In fact, I'm going to mix in a tiny bit of Doomball Brown into this first layer. It's not a huge amount, but so if we look, this is the Doomball Brown on my hand here, and this is our new Mephiston Red, so it's a bit thinner. And we're going to, the highlight on here is going to be at the top because these knee pads are curved. So the highlight's always going to be at the top rather than at the bottom, whereas if it had been a perfectly straight surface, completely vertical, I would have done the highlight actually at the bottom, because that looks more natural. But because there is a curve here, the highlight is definitely going to be towards the top of the knee pad. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to go from about 2/3 down and just paint up. And this is quite a thin paint, so it should dry quite quickly. So you can see it's still behaving a little bit like a glaze, but that's fine. A smooth transition here is desirable. So now I'm going to shift over to using my thinned down Mephiston Red. As you can see, it's much more brightly saturated. And this is going to be from about the halfway point. So our transition's starting to build up now. You can see it starting to emerge. Just going to do a little bit more of this. And if you're batch painting a bunch of these, then you don't have to wait for each layer to dry, because by the time you've done 5 of these, the layer on the first one will be completely dry. So you can see here I'm resting my hand on the table, and then I've got these 2 fingers resting on this finger, which is behind the model, and this allows me to keep my paintbrush completely steady in these strokes. Also, it's important to hold your paintbrush where the ferrule is. If you're holding your paintbrush back here, hold on then you're not going to have as much control. You want to hold it here so that you've got a lot more control. So that's looking quite nice now. I'm just going to get some Evil Sun Scarlet out, and we're not going to do much with this, but this is going to really sell the effect. This paint being the layer is already quite thin, so we don't need to thin it down too much. So if we look here, not sure how easy that is to see. It's quite brighter, closer to pure red than Mephiston red. So we're just going to do this in the top third, top 25%-ish. Let's make sure I'm on camera. I am. And this looks brighter going on, but it dulls down as it dries. So I think one more of those, and then I might go back and blend between the Evil Sun Scarlet and the Mephiston red a little bit more. Just to smooth that out a bit. But that's basically it for that red knee pad. So there we go. That's nice and smooth. Now I'm going to take some Cadian Flesh Tone. And this is going to be our edge highlight colour. I'm going to use a Broken Toad size 0. And I'm not thinning this down, but I am making sure I don't have too much on my brush. I'm just going to very carefully try and edge highlight the top of this knee pad, only where the red is. And I'm going to just dot these rivets. Not much tidying up required there, but I am going to use some of my Deathwatch Black. And I'm just going to use that with my Broken Toad. And I'm just going to tidy up the edges. Let's be at the bottom on this side. And also across the top here. And there we go. That's our Third Watch Company knee pad marking. So I'm going to be spraying the arms with Vallejo acrylic metal colour silver. And this is a very shiny silver paint, which is specifically formulated to go through airbrushes, and it goes on really well to an airbrush. You can paint this on with a paintbrush as well, but it might take a couple of thin coats in order to cover it properly. I'm going to use over a black primer, and obviously I have my silver arm separate from the rest of my model, because that's just smart. I'm using a Harden Steenbeck Evolution. It's got a 0.5mm nozzle in it. So there's the silver in there. You can see it's very shiny. Drop the flow. Good. Okay. And am I in shot? I think I'm in shot. I think I'm in focus as well. So we're just gonna... This is quite a gentle misting. You can see how well it covers. So now we have our silver arm. Our first step is going to be picking out all of this detail, and for that we're going to be using a combination of Nuln Oil and Abaddon Black. We're going to be using Nuln Oil to get us that wash consistency that will go into the recesses, and we're going to be using Abaddon Black in order to be able to increase the pigmentation of the Nuln Oil. So, a small amount of Abaddon Black onto the wet palette, just a tip will do. About that much. And then about 2 brush loads-ish of null oil. Maybe 3. Depends how much comes up on your brush. 2 should do. 2 and a bit. There's no hard and fast consistency for this, just kind of have to play it by ear. I mean, see, it's acting like a paint there, more than a wash. So what we want to do is take this and spread it all over a nice shiny surface. If you get a bit too much in any one area, just apply a bit of the old dirty finger technique, just to rub it off the surfaces you don't want. And because of the Abaddon Black, it will actually stay that dark. But because of the wash, you see it's not gone on the tops of all of the letters. This is a mix I developed specifically for doing Deathwatch shoulder pads and all of these Deathwatch details, because the null oil on its own would dry too grey. Okay, now that wash is dry, you can see how much definition we've got on that lettering now. In between the fingers, it's worked really well. So our next step is we're actually going to take some Liberator Gold, we're going to paint in that skull. Now I'm just painting this over the top of the metallic, and it actually covers quite well over other metallics. So you can use this method for anywhere that you want to be gold. On a Deathwatch Marine, just paint it silver first, and then you can go back in and touch it up to be gold later. Use the side of my brush to find this raised detail. And that's it. When painting over this metallic paint, it actually pretty much covers in one coat, which is great. Once I've done that, the last thing we're going to do is go in with some VMA Chrome. And we're just going to use this to edge highlight a few of the details on our shoulder pad. So this is actually a little bit shiny, brighter than the metal colour earlier, especially once you get wash on it. I'm just using that to pick up these edges around the rim. And I'm not exactly sure if it's showing up on camera well, but you can tell the difference in real life once you move the model around and it starts catching the light. And you notice that the edges are just a bit shinier. And I'm also going to catch a little patch there and up to this cylinder shape here. And this is subtle stuff we're doing here at this point, but I can see on the camera's zebra stripes that it's actually reflecting more in those areas that I've just painted than the surrounding areas. And that's it, that's basically all I do for the Deathwatch shoulder pads there. It's a very simple, quick process. And I'm going to start off by painting all of the metallic areas first with a big fat dry brush. I've not painted or highlighted the hand that's holding the bolter, because I know that I'm going to get mess on it from painting this bolter, so we'll paint that at the very end the same way that I did all the rest of the black armour. So I'm going to be using some BMA Gun Grey and my nice soft dry brush. And I'm just going to wipe off most of that, not too much though. I'm just going to hit almost all of the bolter. There are areas that I know are going to be red, which I'm not going to hit. But anything that's going to be metallic, and there's quite a lot of this on the model, but this builds up a much thinner layer of paint than brush painting the metallics on. And we'll typically leave some black in the very recesses so you don't have to necessarily do a shade later, which is always beneficial. I don't like using shades if I can help it anymore, as they have a tendency to not be under control. And I will return once I'm finished applying this dry brush. Okay, so that dry brush is complete on both sides. It's gone on nice and smooth. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of BMA Chrome and do a very light dry brush with that, just to give us a little bit of a highlight. I'm just going to be going like this, top to bottom. Because we want these places to kind of look like they're chrome plated or nickel plated. But we don't want them to be too shiny. And there we go. That's basically the metallics done. There may be some touch up depending upon how neat the next stage goes. But we've kept this nice and thin, whereas if we've painted this on with a brush and then put a wash over it, it would have actually been a much thicker layer of paint in the end, and it would have probably obscured or made the edges of the bolter casing not quite as sharp as if we had dry brushed it on like this. So now I'm going to base coat all the areas of the bolter casing that's going to be red with some Doom Bull brown. So just being careful not to get it on my metallics too much. It's almost inevitable that you will at some point though. So as you can see, this is going to take a couple of layers to coat well. It's worth being neat here because this is going to result in a much better finish than painting the red and then painting the metallics. I know, I speak from experience. I've tried it the other way around, and this way it looks much nicer in the end. So, most likely places you'll get it is on that little widget right there, which is absolutely fine because you can just go in with a blob of chrome paint and just blob on the top of that widget at the end to touch it up, and no one will notice. As long as you don't get it on anywhere that's actually depending upon a dry brushed highlight, such as the round surfaces, you're pretty much golden. That's our first layer. I'll come back once I've done a couple more and we've got our base coat done. Okay, now that my Doom Bull brown base coat is done, I've mounted my bolter to a cork here so that I've got something to hold on to. And I'm just going to use some thin down Mephiston red and start blocking in my highlights. Now, I know how this is going to be held by the marine here, roughly in a downward angle like that. It's going to be angled slightly towards our light source. So I'm actually going to put the highlight here at the bottom. Rather than at the top, because essentially the reflection will be coming down and then reflecting back off, and so it's going to be more noticeable on the bottom edge there of the bolter. And I'm ending my brush strokes where I want the paint to be the brightest. As the paint always pools where you lift the brush off the model. Also with regard to the top, I'm just going to put highlight again towards the angled down portion of the weapon. Cork makes it much easier to hold onto this than if I was just holding it by the paperclip alone. Starting to reach full coverage on the Mephiston Red down here now. Just going to put in a little bit along the bottom edge here. This side. I'm going to take some Evil Sun Scarlet, just going to thin that down a little bit because it's quite intense, and continue the highlight within a smaller area than before. Going to try and treat these separated sections as two different volumes of space. So I've got an extra highlight going along the bottom there. Now I've gone over in a few little areas, but it's not a huge problem, as I can just go back in with some gun grey and block that in later. I think that's going to be enough. At this point, yeah, that looks pretty good to me. I'm just going to do the other side the same way and do my little touch-ups with some gun grey, and then I'll be back. Okay, so our red is done on the casing there. I've touched up the metal. It was mostly just in here with the bolt casing up here on the sight, and this little button there that's done on both sides. So next I'm going to take some Cadian Flesh Tone, and we're just going to do some edge highlights in the red here. This has been sat on my wet palette a little bit too long, so it's actually separated a little bit, and there's now a bit too much water in it, so I'm just going to use a little bit straight out of the pot here. So I'm just going to continue those, and we'll come back for the last couple of steps in this model. I'll also paint this hand off camera as well. Okay, so my edge highlights are, with the Cadian Flesh Tone, are complete. I painted in this hand. You can see here I've also highlighted these little ridged bits. I've now got a little bit of pallid witch flesh, and I'm just going to use this to dot the corners. Like so. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to paint a melter barrel with some Balthazar gold, and I'm just going to paint very gently, trying to leave that black in the recesses there so I don't have to go over it again. There we go, that's the Balthazar gold. The last step is to get some Abaddon black and mix it with a little bit of Nuln oil. You don't need very much for this. And I'm going to use a fine brush. I'm just going to paint this into any areas that I want to blackline. So for example, here. And that's basically it. That's our Deathwatch bolt gun done. Okay, next up we're going to do the eye lenses, and as you can see the helmet's just been painted the same way as the rest of the armour. And we've got a regular eye and a bionic eye, and we're going to do them both exactly the same way. So we're going to start off by base coating with Mephiston Red, then we're going to do a layer of Evil Sun Scarlet, another layer of Fire Dragon Bright, then we're just going to dot the brightest part of the eye with some Dawn Yellow, and then we're going to glaze the whole thing with some Bloodletter. So I'm using my smallest brush for this because these are quite fiddly details to get in. And I've got the head mounted on a paperclip on a cork, so I've got something nice and big to hold onto without having to have the head on the model. So just going to start from the inner corner of the eye. And this is difficult. Requires a lot of concentration to go over. There we go, that's the first layer of Mephiston Red. We'll probably only need one layer of each of these paints, because we're going to be building up an effect. And normally to do the other eye I would turn the model upside down, but since the other eye is a bionic eye, it's actually very easy to paint. Or I guess it's a targeter. I'm just going to paint the centre of that with some Mephiston Red. So there we go, like that. Okay, next we're going to use some Evil Sun's Scarlet. And we're just going to paint this in, and we're going to paint this closer to the nose, I guess, of the helmet. From there. And I'm putting it this way because that's the easier way to paint this. And just paint a smaller area inside the bionic eye lens than before. Now we're going to take some Fire Dragon Bright. We're going to do the same thing but on a smaller area. So take your Fire Dragon Bright and just eye lens, and then the bionic eye. Probably get the idea by now. Smaller area than before. No prizes for guessing what I'm going to do next. That's right, Dawn Yellow. I'm going to put the tiniest of dots. This needs a good shake. These edge paints are quite thick and tend to separate. So this needs a little bit of water added to it, but not too much because we do not want this to lose control. But without it, it will just be a big blob on the end of our brush. So we just want to do a tiny dot in the middle of that Fire Dragon Bright. And it will look a bit extreme at first. So we're going to blend that back with some bloodletter glaze once it's dry. So let's take bloodletter glaze straight from the pot. Don't want too much on your brush. And we're just going to run that into the eye sockets. Get it to the point where it looks like it's completely filled the area. Which obviously you won't be able to do with the bionic eye because it's a curved surface. Clean your brush, remove the water, and then just suck up the excess. And that will smooth out all of those blends. And that's your helmet eye lenses. All done. This light, and for that we need some moot green. So that's moot green, it's nice and bright. And we're just going to paint that in. We're going to get the surrounding area as well because we want this to look like a glow. That's why I haven't painted this with a metallic paint. But if we do it this way, we just have a glow effect on it, and it will sell the fact that this is a light. Do the second coat there, and then I'm going to take a little bit of my dawn yellow that I've still got on my wet palette, mix it with a little bit of my moot green to create a highlight colour, which I'm just going to dot in the middle, like so. A little bit of pure dawn yellow now, dot that very in the middle of light source. And lastly, I'm just going to paint the brightest part with some white. Okay, so I'm just using some artist's acrylic white here, but you can use any white. And I'm just going to dot that right in the middle of that dawn yellow, or at least in the top. And there's a small green light. So that was part 2 of how to paint Deathwatch. Part 3 will be coming up next week, where we'll be covering the knife, the leather, and his snow base. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe it. And I'd like to say thank you to all of my patrons from Patreon. Without you, I wouldn't be able to keep making videos. If you'd like to join my Patreon, there'll be a link on the end screen and down in the doobly-doo. Every patron gets to vote on the upcoming videos that I make, and in advanced tiers they get early access to all of the tutorials that I make, as well as some other bonuses and extras. This series is an ongoing series because I'm painting my own Deathwatch army, so later on in the series we'll also be covering how to paint some different vehicles and maybe even a couple of characters and how to paint some faces. All depends upon what people want to see. So again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Do the like, share, subscribe, click the bell, all of that good YouTube type stuff, and I'll see you later. Bye.